911, go ahead, it's your emergency, please. I have a client that's locked themselves in their bedroom, and they have a piece of glass, and they're indicating that they're going to hurt themselves.
911. Yeah, hi, my staff is abusing me.
And how are they abusing you?
They won't give me my ice cream.
911, what's your emergency? Hi, I have two clients yelling and screaming, and I cannot get them to stop. Oh, now they're throwing markers at each other. What's your address?
10-4, Burn Road. Here we go again. So much for lunch. Our biggest frustration from a law enforcement perspective when it comes to responding to repeat calls for service is kind of showing up on a call and realizing we don't really need to be there, or this isn't really a law enforcement matter. We get a lot of calls at specifically adult foster care homes where we'll show up and it'll be a conflict between a staff member and a client, and that's purely what it is.
And it simply isn't an emergency that required law enforcement.
We'll get a call that they're a missing person. We show up at the house, it's a very serious call, and they're 10 minutes past when they're supposed to return. Well, does that really meet the criteria? And
So if we're called to a crisis that doesn't necessarily necessitate a 911 response, that's keeping our deputies from going on something that they should be.
one of those calls could tie up one or two officers for anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on the nature of it.
I would say almost the majority of those calls were then transport related, looking for, staff looking for some means to transport an individual to primarily the hospital. Not all the time was that the appropriate solution. It might be that that person does have to leave as far as a consequence internally or something, but no crime has been committed, and nor can we force them to go to the hospital.
So those frustrations really become readily apparent, and there becomes a tension between law enforcement and the frontline staff that we're responding to. And they show up and they're not getting the level of police service that maybe they should, and we're not getting the expertise or the information from the staff that we need.
I think we had a lot of similar frustrations that the police officers had. We recognized that we were overutilizing some of the services and supports in our communities.
In any human service field, adult foster care specifically, the wages are very low. There's a lot of high turnover, and individuals that are working in our field sometimes experience really difficult situations with our folks and often don't understand all the systems that are in play and might jump to using resources because that's the only thing that they have on their mind.
We're not mental health professionals. Our supervisors and our owners maybe, but our online staff that are with the clients 24/7 are not holding a professional title.
People just didn't understand each other's perspectives, and so law enforcement would show up and the call would be over, or law enforcement would show up and we would say, we have things under control, and they would have to take the person away, which reinforced the behavior and was frustrating for the staff.
We also recognized that within neighborhoods and within our communities we were seen as not a positive thing, and we really think that the individuals that we're supporting are positive members of the community.
With person-centered planning, clients do have rights. They have just as many rights as you and I do. One of them being able to have a phone, and having a cell phone is not something that I can take away, just like I can't take your phone away.
We weren't necessarily getting as good service as we thought we should be getting sometimes when we really did have real emergencies, and staff got frustrated. Staff got frustrated when police came and saw them as a nuisance call.
We see a unique perspective, from seeing them all day long. We're with them and we know their ins and their outs, and to be able to have a person at the hospital that I can call and feel comfortable sharing those details with, or with law enforcement, having them come out, because I think there's a big concern and law enforcement is necessary, and having them come out with all of the details makes such a difference in being able to truly cater the services that those other agencies provide to the person and what they need coming from the person that knows them best.
And so law enforcement initiated a conversation with St. Louis County as the licensing entity for adult foster care providers. And so we started that conversation and started looking at ways that we could solve this problem together, and ended up inviting in other community partners such as the hospitals, Ascension, St. Luke's, the Birch Tree Center, Crisis Response Team, in order to really look at how to find a solution to this. So we invited adult foster care providers, like as many as we could in our community, to come together. And then we had a brainstorming session where we could really focus on what is the definition or what constitutes as an emergency, so that we're all on the same page as a community.
Our big push early on was not to be punitive towards adult foster care homes and their licensing and all that stuff, just to open up lines of communication, review calls for service, and see how we can do better.
We developed this person-centered incident matrix, which is a crisis response flow chart that helps walk individuals, the staffs that work in these adult foster care homes, discern what is a crisis, what's a mental health crisis, what's a physical health crisis, and how to know when to appropriately call for 911 or utilize the other resources like crisis response or hospitals.
We have implemented the PCIM and the manual into our initial training, and essentially it's another tool in our tool belt to use when managing difficult situations.
They like having a flow chart. They like having something visual. That's been a positive piece for them. Encouraging them to not always go to 911 first, that they can call other resources within the company, or they can call other resources, including the Crisis Center, Birch Tree, and maybe even consulting with a mental health professional instead of taking a person into the hospital. Some of those pieces have been really positive.
So that's one thing that we've been able to do, is put this tool, this decision-making tool, in their hands, and I think it's important that our cops understand that that's what's being applied on that line level.
St. Louis County 911.
And so if a staff is calling 911, they've triaged it to the best of their ability, following our matrix. They feel it necessitates a 911 response.
Having the police understand that we're doing the best we can, and we are trying our hardest to reduce those calls for service, and this has been a great help.
We want to make less work for all people involved, and the documentation on our end and on the foster care home, I think, is constantly improving. And then, of course, the clients, the front line that are receiving these services, are getting good customer service.
Without the collaborative, it wouldn't be possible to build those connections and provide that person-centered approach.
Production of this video was made possible thanks to support from these partners in the Person-Centered Incident Matrix Initiative.